Have you ever been at that point after leaving the military where you just kind of pause and think, now what? The uniform's off and you're left trying to figure out who you are now. That's exactly where Lee Freeburg, our guest today, found himself. He was drifting in what he called his weak man phase and not living up to his full potential. What happened next totally changed how he viewed life, his purpose, and what it really meant for him to move forward. Before we get into the episode, though, I do want to take a moment to raise awareness for something important to our community, the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. This organization is working to build a permanent national memorial in Washington, D.C. to honor the service members, families, and civilians impacted by the global war on terrorism. This memorial serves as both a tribute to those who served and a way to ensure that their sacrifices are recognized and remembered for generations to come. If you'd like to learn more or find out how you can support their mission, visit gwatmemorialfoundation.org. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey Lee, welcome to the show. I'm really glad to have you here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get too much into your story and everything like that, for the listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with you and your background and stuff, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, military history, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I'm originally from Wyoming. It is a state out in the West. Born and raised there. I was actually adopted when I was a couple days old. So I never knew my biological parents, siblings, anything like that. And in my family, we were very strong military. Both my grandpa and an uncle, great uncles, all served in the Navy, some of them in World War II, some of them during the Korean War. And it's actually funny that today is actually October 23rd, and it's the anniversary of the barracks being blown up in Lebanon. And my uncle was a gunner's mate on the USS Virginia on that ship in the bay that morning when it happened.
Oh
And
wow,
him and his crew did figure eights for 48 hours bombing Lebanon after the barracks got blown up. But he
wow,
remembers it to this day. It's just what a cool coincidence.
sure.
So I joined the military, or joined the Navy. A lot of family influence in there, like I said. I spent 8 years serving my country, and I joined in 2000. And obviously, that's pre 9/11. And when I joined, I was very excited. I knew that I was going to go to the military, or I was going to go to war. Like that was like I signed the dotted line. It was something when you sign, you have to be willing to go, and I did. Of course, it was during peacetime. Everything was hunky dory while I was in boot camp and corps school and all that good stuff. And then I was actually stationed in Okinawa, Japan, the morning of 9/11, and I was super excited. Oh yes, I mean, yeah, that sucks. 9/11 sucks, but it meant that I was going to do what my purpose was, and that was to
Yeah,
serve my country in combat. And it never came. And so I got done with Okinawa and I got transferred over to North Carolina. And that unit was supposed to deploy. And turns out, no, they were actually what's called forward deployed. And so I spent 2 years watching my buddies get on planes. That's where I was at. I was on the AP flight line, putting packs on planes and put people, packs, all kinds of stuff. And so for 2 years, I watched my buddies go off to war. And it was really disappointing to me. I kind of was like, why am I here? What am I doing? And I really got into something maybe we'll talk about a little later. And that what I call my weak man phase. And we'll get into that later and whatnot. But then the Navy took me to Naples, Italy. And so I got to spend 2 years in Naples, Italy, working in an emergency room there. And then when that was done, I was like, I want to go to war. Like I want to go serve my country and do what I've been instructed to do. And so I was calling the units all over the country, like, hey, when you guys going? What do you do? Blah blah blah. Called the detailer, said, hey, I would like to go to this unit. And they said, yep, this unit's deploying. You can go. And turns out that was Second EOD Company out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and they were in the rotation 6 months or 8 months out from deployment, super stoked. And so I went there, got embedded with a unit, got on a team there. And then in 2007, I deployed with them to Iraq and spent the majority of 2007 in Iraq serving my country. And there was some events, of course, it's war, but when I got done, I knew that's what I was wanting to do in my life is serve my country. And that's, I got
Yeah.
that opportunity. And then of course, when I got out of the Navy in 2008, kind of started my journey through life. And now I kind of ended up where I'm at now.
So something that you said there, and I'm sure a lot of veterans who are listening could probably relate to what you were saying, but some of the civilians, people who maybe never served or didn't know anyone who served and just kind of interested in stories like this, they may not really understand what it is that you're talking about. But you're talking about how after 9/11, you're like, oh, this is good. I get to go do my job, right? And of course, it's not. This is good that 9/11 happened, but you joined during peacetime, and your goal was to go to war. So obviously joining the military, that's probably a pretty good indication you'll be able to get to war. But if there's no war going on, you're kind of out of luck. But this was kind of like, hey, now you get to do what you were trained to do. And it's not just, hey, let's just keep training and keep training and keep training and not ever go anywhere. You had that opportunity. As a matter of fact, anyone who was in the military at that point had that opportunity. Some people had, probably different reactions than you after coming off of, however many years of being in peacetime and not really expecting it. And then all of a sudden there's this sucker punch, and some people are like, oh, geez, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, things are getting real now. I'm not sure I still want to stick around, but you had the opposite reaction, and that's that's what you want, obviously, in any military service. You want people who are there and want to do the job, and obviously, yeah, there's some great benefits coming along with being in the military. That's why a lot of people join, but you definitely want those people who are like, you know what, send me in, put me in, because that's what I want to do. That's what I meant to do. And so that, to me, it kind of struck a chord, because I was like, I get where you're coming from, but I can totally understand how some people may not get it, right?
Exactly. Yep. That's true. And and it's not just, I think, civilians, but I have a lot of buddies who were on active duty who had the same mentality as I did, and they got all the way to that line and never got to, in a sense, perform their job. And it was really disappointing to them. Like, yeah, I'm here. I did all this work. I trained. I got ribbons. I got badges. I got pins, and I'm at the gate and I can't do what I trained to do. And they come home disappointed. And that's kind of sad to say, but it's the training. It's just the way that, like, you begin to think about your purpose in life.
Yeah.
And the training reinforces that purpose, and you become that identity. Something I was thinking about prior, I was reading your questions, was the identity of the hospital corpsman. I wasn't a hospital corpsman when I was in high school. I went to the Navy and became a hospital corpsman, and I assumed that identity, and I lived that identity every single day while I was in the military, whether it was with the Marines or whether it was with a Navy, the sailors and people like that. My identity was a hospital corpsman, and part of that identity has never left. But once I left the military, I kind of had to put that identity, because that identity was go to the range, shoot, go on a hike, go out the field, go figure out if you can go to another range. Can you go to sniper school? Can you go to jump school? That was the identity. Can I go to Iraq? Can I go to Afghanistan? And that was my identity that I wrapped up in hospital corpsman. And so when I left the Navy, I had to leave that identity behind, because there's no job out here in the world for that identity. And so you got to go out and try to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And so I'm going to just let that go right there. That's
Yeah. I think a lot of people end up having that, and regardless of what their job was in the military, they have this identity wrapped up in whatever it is that they were doing. They could have been, a corpsman like you were, or infantry, or they could be armor, or, any, you name it, any different thing that they did in the military. And again, that just becomes a part of who you are. And, we all have our kind of tongue-in-cheek moments with our, the different branches between, the Army and the Air Force and the Navy, and the, all these different jokes that we might tell amongst each other, and we're better than this, and whatever. But you build yourself up as like I'm a part of this team. I'm a part of this, and like that is the identity that you take on. And then one day you take that uniform off for the last time, and you're not that person anymore. And that's a tough pill for some people to swallow, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so for you, what was that like? Kind of hanging up that uniform, figuratively or literally, whatever it is that you actually went through there, and then kind of making that switch in your head to say like, okay, now I'm something else now. I'm not that what I used to be. I'm now something else, and how do I move forward from here? And what do I do after that?
I didn't want to hang up the uniform. I was actually fighting to try to stay in. So leaving was heartbreaking to me,
Hmm.
mostly because there is I step back and I look now and I can say the military had safety. It was a safety net. As long as you did what you were told, been where you were, all these things, you could do whatever you want within the rules of the UCMJ.
Right.
And that was comforting. That was so nice. Like you knew your boundaries. And then you leave the military and you have endless boundaries. The entire world is an option to you. And one thing I think that military does a really good job at is it teaches us to be adaptable and be able to be inserted anywhere, become proficient in that, and then do that job. And so I left the Navy with unlimited skill potential. And so whatever I wanted to do, I could do. The problem was I didn't know what to do. There was nobody to tell me, Lee, go this direction. Lee, this is the next step. This is this, and go from there. And I know a lot of veterans, they suffer with this same thing, this lack of purpose, as well as kind of I lost camaraderie, which I think a lot of us lose as well, and that's a big deal. I didn't really have like a home unit. I didn't have a group of buddies that I went to boot with and all the way through. Like it was like duty station, duty station. I knew this guy, I passed that guy, whatever else, and then I was gone. And so I didn't really have like somebody I could just pick the phone up and say, "Hey, man, what do I do now?" Like
Mm-hmm.
there's not really that close camaraderie. And so I went out in the world trying to figure it out on my own, and I stumbled around. And like I was talking about a little bit earlier, I was in what I call a weak man phase. And it was in this phase that I just kind of lived from pleasure to pleasure. Whatever filled my appetite, I just did and enjoyed and whatever else, while knowing in the back of my head and within inside me that I was failing my own purpose, that I was not living up to my own full potential. And in my weak man state, I did a lot of things that are emotional, just emotionally. I just rode up and down the roller coaster of emotions, pleasure from pleasure, and just enjoying what life had to offer. And I was like, this is such a waste. And it was about 10 years ago, this August, I was out with a buddy. We're riding four wheelers and we're just zipping around a neighborhood with quads, like souped up Suzuki's type quads. I don't know what they were, but I'm cranking on it, just having a good old times, doing cookies, and my foot slipped off, and the quad rode up the back of my leg and pulled me off of it, slamming me into a vehicle where I broke my collarbone, and it shot down the street. And I'm like laying in the middle of the street, and it starts raining, and like rain's pouring down on me, and I'm like laying here, and I knew, like, man, dude, I'm busted up, like I'm broken. And so I get up and I start to try to figure out what's going on, whatever else. And my buddy takes me to the ER. Sure enough, cracked ribs, broken collarbone, just all busted up. And it was like what I call my 180 moment. It was in that moment I'm laying in the ER thinking to myself, had I been a little bit stronger, had I not been doing stupid things, I wouldn't have made such a dumb mistake. And I thought, well, maybe I needed to make that dumb mistake so that I could wake up and begin down a path. And it wasn't too long after that, I ended up a really good job working for a company called Martin Marietta, where I was driving big, huge cat loaders, like front end loaders, and plug my Bluetooth into the radio, and I would listen to audiobooks all day long, 10-hour shifts, just listen to audiobooks. I just went one book after another, and I began to deal with things that I had shoved down and put away for so long. And I began to let go of the things that I consider to be trauma, right? Like
Hmm.
the weak man, he has triggers and he feeds those triggers. And I begin to identify those things and say, dude, why are you reacting in such this way? Why are you overboarding on this? Why are you depressed about this? Like these are all things that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. And so as I began to recover and begin to pull myself out of this weak man mindset, I began to set goals and go, well, okay, cool. I've got some goals now. Well, then I learned it's not just having goals. You got to put some action to those goals. So I started putting action to goals, and I started to see one goal accomplished after another, and I began to build a purpose for my life. And then 2020 happened, and then
That kind
yeah,
of screwed everything up, didn't it?
well, for some, I think it did, but for me, it was like another one of those like four-wheeler accidents. It
Yeah.
was like, hey, all right, now it's time to switch gears and you're going to go down this direction. And it was in 2020 while everybody was I think everybody was suffering. Saw it as an opportunity, a reset. Everybody became equal at one moment. There was stocks to buy, there were no jobs, whatever. We were all experiencing the same thing. And it's like, in this moment, you can choose whether to go with the flow, fall in line, just be another cog in the machine, or you can take the path untrodden and start a new thing and go a certain direction. And that's what I did. And so I headed down this new road, untrod to myself. I just didn't know like what I was actually going to do, but I just started doing it. And I started a business painting lines and parking lots, came up with an idea for a machine to help do this industry better and help the actual workers in this industry. And so I designed this machine, and now I'm 8 weeks away from finishing the prototype, and I already have a licensing agreement, and the whole works is like in the process. And I'm literally about to bring like my multi-million dollar idea to the market, coming from a guy almost 20 years ago who just I mean, I pushed the lines of the UCMJ. I'm just be honest. Like I pushed the lines, but by the grace of God, like I didn't get in trouble. I have my never got caught medals, like. But now I'm on a path. I'm going to start my own business, and just go down this direction.
Yeah, and so when you were talking about the weak man phase that you're going through and kind of being soft and chasing after these guilty pleasures or whatever that you're kind of chasing after, you know, on the surface it sounds like, well, what's the big deal, right? Like, hey, you're doing things that make you happy, you're doing things that are enjoyable to you and whatnot, but you start digging down a little bit deeper on that, and correct me if I'm wrong on what I'm about to say here, but when you dig a little bit deeper, you can take something like, hey, you know what? Eating cookies and brownies and cake and stuff like that. That stuff makes me happy. It also makes me fat, but that stuff makes me happy because it tastes good, right? And so I can keep doing that, but it's going to take me away from my goal of maybe losing weight, gaining muscle, those types of things, getting in shape is going to take me away from what I actually want to do. And so you're not as disciplined anymore. And then you start, hey, well, you know what? I did it this one day. It'll be okay the next day too. And then the day after that and the day after that. And it just keeps on going and going until you get to a point where it's like, shit, I don't even recognize myself anymore, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Zig Ziglar that said that if you take one step off direction, eventually you end up 1,000 miles
Yeah. Yeah.
apart from where you're supposed to be. And obviously being a sailor, I like to refer to a lot of things in life based on sailing terms and things like that. And a ship is your life, and every ship needs to have a destination. One of my favorite quotes is a ship is safest in harbor, but that's not what it's meant to do,
Right.
right? You got to be out on the seas. You got to have a port, the destination that you're headed towards. And then you have to set your life in alignment, which is what some call setting the sails. You set your life in alignment with that destination that you're going to. And you should absolutely, without a doubt, expect storms, because storms are
Yeah.
necessary to build strength and build experience. And the more storms you go through, the less fear you have, because you knew that the last storm hit you and you made it through that storm, and you're going to hit another storm. You're going to make it through, but it's going to be rough. It'll be
Right.
rough times.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I love that analogy too, because as you're talking, I'm like, my head's going of, just thinking of a ship out on the ocean. And like you said, yeah, sure, there's going to be some storms and some rough waters and stuff that come your way, and you're going to have to navigate through that and figure out how to get through that in in the best way possible, the safest way possible, and you learn during those experiences. If this is a very first storm you've ever sailed through, yeah, it's probably going to be a little more rocky than an experienced sailor might have, and so. But after that time and the next time and time after that, it's just going to get better and better. There also may be some storms that you just can't go through at all, and you might have to go around. So it may take you a little longer to get to your goal, whatever that objective is. But you still can get there by kind of just shifting course a little bit, and maybe things aren't going exactly how you planned it to go, but it doesn't mean you just give up and just turn around and go back home. You shift course and you go to where it is that you need to go, just maybe a different direction than you originally intended, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes you have to just, if you use the port as the goal, completion of the goal, occasionally you have to change ports, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give you an example. I'm in right now, like I said, I'm in the process of starting my own business, and I could do the end port. Obviously, is the business is financial freedom, being able to work for fun, not because I have to, things like that, and then obviously leaving some for my children and something for my children's children, and so on. But to get there, I could either go a certain route, which takes me like through an SBA loan and through a whole scenario that direction, or I could just readjust direction and I could self fund. I could go down this path here. It's going to take a little longer and there's going to be a little more sweat and tears. But in the end, it could bring more value. But this other way will get me to that point a little faster. And so sometimes you have to decide, hey, is this port the better, or is this one gets me to the same goal, but this direction might take a little longer. This one might bring me smack dab to the port. So
Right,
it's
and neither one of those are necessarily the wrong answer, right?
exactly,
They're
yeah.
just, depends on what it is that you're looking for. If you're not looking for a loan and that type of thing, and you want to, bootstrap it and do it on your own, then, more power to you and go for it. But if you're looking to get to that destination a little bit quicker, then yeah, maybe the loan is the right option. Just requires, obviously paying back a loan and all those kind of things. And that ends up being a little bit more costly, but if you can justify those expenses, then maybe it makes sense to you. So again, there's unlike like in the ocean, it's pretty open, and you can probably pretty much just go straight line in most cases, but there may be some obstacles in the way, and you may have to decide, do I want to go around this thing, do I want to go to the left, do I want to go to the right, and which way am I going to go? Like, well, there's definitely obstacles in the ocean. I guess you could look at the Titanic and it's
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
so they should have zigged or zagged or whichever one they should have done, but they didn't do it.
They didn't do
um, you know
whatever it was supposed to do. Yeah, absolutely.
so I was doing a little bit of research and kind of looking up, a little bit about you and stuff that you are into now, but I found stuff on fatherhood and spiritual resilience and things like that are seem to be important aspects in your life. How are these elements kind of working together with you in terms of your post service life and kind of what you're doing now?
Great question. So my family, I grew up in a Christian home, and so we attended church quite a bit, and so God is very important to me. And I'm just human. I'm definitely not perfect. Like I said, like I lived a whole weak man mentality for many, many years. But God's important to me. And I want my kids to know what's valuable to me. And so a while back here, I wrote a book for my daughter. And at the time when I wrote it, I actually wrote it specifically for her, because my biological family, my granddad and his brother both passed away at 45 years old. They both passed away from just heart failure because they were fat and drank and were way out of shape and all that good stuff. But it's in my genes. Like I have a potential to die at the age of 45. And so I wanted to make sure that I left something for my daughter, something that she could look to and say, this was my dad, or this is my
Mm.
dad right here. And so I wrote her a book and I called it How to Live a Better Life. And I wrote 6 basic chapters about the fundamentals, the things that I believe are fundamental to life. And of course, I did some research into these things. And when it came down to, I wrote a whole chapter called On Religion. And so, of course, I had to go out into the world and look at all the different types of religions and study. And you know what I found? Every civilization, every generation, we all have a religion. Some religions don't have anything to do with God or a higher power. Sometimes that religion is number 69 on the Denver Broncos, and that's your God. And
Sure.
you buy his jersey, and you're at every single game, and you see a magazine, Sports Illustrated's got him on the front cover. Boom, you pick it up because he said something, and you're on his Instagram, and he becomes your God, and you worship him, and you if he told you to jump off a bridge because that would save humanity, you're on the bridge because that's what your God would say to do. And so I wanted to make sure that my daughter and my children understood the God that I believe in. And of course I showed up like I'm giving them the option. This is what the world has to offer. But this is my God. And this
Hmm.
is the direction I'm going to go with my life. And it was a really good I mean, it was a really good study. Like it really challenged my own personal beliefs about what I believe in as far as religion goes and spirituality and things like that, and it secured a few things for me. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it to anybody, veteran, civilian, whatever. If you have just take time, just take a time and figure out who your God is, and it'll change the way you live your life. I guarantee it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because as you're talking and said, everybody has some sort of religion, and I was like, well, okay, there's atheists out there, so that may not kind of compute. But then you mentioned kind of more cultural icons and things like that, which, yeah, I mean, there people follow. I mean, just look at social media, just all the things that are out there, and how people follow certain celebrities or athletes or whoever, and they almost treat them as if they're their own god or something of whatever religion they're praying to, the Taylor Swift religion or whatever it is.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
um
The craze from a couple months ago when they got engaged, right? Like that
yeah,
was
right.
insane. Like, why? What's so big deal about two people get engaged all the time, right? Do we see it on the media? No.
Exactly, and the funny thing is, I remember from when all this was going on, the NFL tweeted out like some congratulation message or something like that to them. I can't remember ever another time that the NFL tweeted out a message to any other player in
No.
in, in the league for getting engaged or anything like that. So it's obviously like something bigger than just sports or music or whatever. It's something else, and people are infatuated with it, and almost in the same way that they are with a religion, or maybe even to the same extent. And
Yep.
and so it's crazy to think about that way. But yeah, I guess if religion isn't just limited to the four walls of a church, and
Absolutely.
right, it's a bigger thing. And so yeah, really think about what is it that you're worshiping, if you will, right? And it may not always be a god, and maybe that requires a little deep dive into who you are and your beliefs and stuff. But it's kind of an interesting thought experiment now that you mention it.
It's worth the exploration. What are you going to lose if you look into who you are as a person? Matter of fact, the first chapter of my book is know thyself. It's the
Mm.
fundamental part of being a human. You have to know who you are. You got to know what you like, you dislike. You got to know your triggers. You got to know how your emotions rise and fall. What makes you happy? What makes you sad? You figure these things out in life, and you become your own individual, and you're not influenced by the rest of the world. Is that the right
And
word?
I think that that's something that a lot of people might struggle with, because the answer to that question, like who you are and what you like and what you want to do with life and all that, it might fluctuate over time. You know, you might have certain interests and certain likes and certain beliefs at one point, and then as life goes on, you get exposed to new things, and that might influence your your own belief system, your own, desires, and your own, the things that make you you. But that's okay, I think, to have some sort of flexibility in that, because life happens, and if you're just so rigid and you're not willing to change anything, it's going to be like, well, that it's a little bit ridiculous when when you get exposed to something new and you're like, nope, can't ever have any change or anything like that. So, in my mind, anyways, I think like that's something that you kind of have to continuously refine and kind of keep top of mind, so that you are aware of who you are. Yeah, sure, maybe 20 years ago you like to do certain thing, but now you're married, you have kids, and well, maybe that's just not the most important thing anymore.
Absolutely. I got a great example for you. My little brother and my cousin are both huge golfers. They love to
Okay.
play golf. And so, of course, what do? I go out buy a set of clubs. I go try to play golf. I even go take lessons. I spend summer after summer just swinging club. And you know what? I can't break a plus 11. I'm not a golfer. Like, it's just, I understand that about myself. And so I don't get up to tee box anymore and just go, well, I'm gonna show these guys. No, no, I'm not a golfer. I'm gonna hit it up 200, 250 yards, and I'm gonna play my game because I understand that's who I am. I don't have
Hmm.
to try to compete on their level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for me, I like to play golf as well, but for me, it's in an individual game. Like, unless you're in a tournament and you're playing, for sake of a tournament and competition and stuff like that. But for me, it's like I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna try to do better than I did the last time I went out. And what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Where did I hit the ball and stuff? And so I'm focused on me and my own game and my own improvement. If someone else has a great game and they beat me, well, good for you. That you just happen to do better than me, and that's wonderful. But I'm really out there competing with myself and trying to get myself better. So when I do get to those kind of tournament level kind of things, I can play and hopefully be competitive. But regardless, I'll be the best version of myself, the best golfer of myself that I can be, because I've been focusing on me and not outwardly on the competition.
And that's active self-awareness. You are actively knowing your stroke, know where you can improve, the things that you can do better so that you can achieve the thing that you desire, which is to play better golf or beat your last score or whatever that is. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, exactly. And if your goal for playing golf or doing anything really is just to have fun and not necessarily to better yourself, and it's just for pure enjoyment purposes, then that's what it's for. And as long as you're having fun and you're enjoying it, and it's not just detracting from other things that are important in your life, then have at it. No harm done there. It's life is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy it, right? And so
Yep, absolutely.
so if that's your purpose, and then go for it. I want to kind of switch gears just a bit here, and I know, like, kind of in your book, how to live a better life is something that I think we all want to have a better life. We all I know, at least for me, I want to make sure that my kids have a better life than I had, and I want to make sure that they're set up for success so that their kids can have a better life than they had, and so on and so forth. And I think it's kind of the same idea as what we were just talking about. The just, I want to be better than I was yesterday, and or the last time I played golf, or the last whatever. I want to be better today than I was yesterday, and I want that next generation to be better than I was, and I want the generation after that to be better than them. I know it's all incremental, you take steps, but there's a kind of aspect of leadership there that comes into mind, where it's not all about you and your needs and everything. Sometimes you have to kind of take a look at, who am I responsible for? What am I in charge of here? And there's, as guys, there's a bit of masculinity type thing, and I know that that comes under fire sometimes, these days where people are talking about toxic masculinity and all that kind of stuff, and nobody really knows how men are supposed to behave anymore, I don't think. And so it gets a little bit tricky there. So kind of have to like redefine these things in your own mind, and kind of figure out how to serve not only yourself but also your family and your community and the people who are important to you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about masculinity or like my opinion
Yeah,
of it?
sure. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah.
I read this question or part of this question that you gave me, and I've been meditating on it for a little bit. Like, how would I respond to this? And there's a lot of data. We can always look at data. We can always look at science. We can always look at these different things. But I think it comes down, first of all, back to the individual, back to the human being as a person. And you're self aware, you know who you are as a person. And there's an old stereotype of masculinity that was seemed to be rough and tough, and you got to get out and break a bull, right? Get out there and break a bull. You can do this, whatever, break some bones. Like that was get after it, stop crying. Like that was a persona of masculinity prior to whatever generation they assign it to. And I don't think that's the way it was. I think it was that way in certain areas, but I think masculinity is kind of it's an adaptive persona in a sense
Hmm.
that we take on, where some people think that riding a bull is the most masculine thing you can possibly do. And some people think jumping out of an airplane into a combat zone is the most masculine thing you can do. But masculinity is adaptive. There are some key fundamentals that a man has to do, and that's take responsibility for his life, take responsibility for those who are under him, and lead those in a direction. You need to provide safety and security. You need to provide food and shelter. You need to provide the basic needs for those you're accountable for. But outside of that, a man has to become the man that he is. An IT guy is just as much as a man as a construction worker. They just have two different personas of masculinity that they feel. One
Hmm.
is labor and one is informational, right? The necessity for hunter gatherer mentality is long. Like, no, we don't have that anymore. Now we hunt for fun, or for some, like when I was a kid, we actually hunted for food. Like we would get as many hunting licenses as we possibly could and shoot as many deer, elk, whatever, because there was six of us in my family. There's mouths to feed, and
Sure.
paying $25 for 90 pounds of deer meat is a lot cheaper than going out in the store and paying 90, whatever it would be equivalent for beef. So that masculine persona was hunting, and it is a traditional male masculine behavior. My sisters, my mom, I've seen them all shoot deer. Are they masculine? No, but they enjoy the activity, the gathering, the hunting, the thrill of the chase, all that good stuff. My dad was a diesel mechanic, and his masculinity was busted knuckles and greasy face, right? That was his masculinity. But when he came home, he was a different person. He
Hmm.
hated working on our cars. That wasn't part of his persona. Like it was that was work, and this is home life.
Sure.
And then it comes down to, I think, a man's values, what he values in life. Does he value the big fat paycheck? Does he value the fancy car? Does he value peace? Does he value tranquility? Does he value drama? I'm sure there are men out there who value a certain amount of drama in their life so that they can feel alive, or whatever for whatever reason but there are people in that persona. And so as men, the last thing we need to be doing is downgrading other men. The strong man, as I'm studying the strong man and learning about him, the strong man actually reaches down and pulls other men up. He pulls his wife, he pulls his children, he brings them up to his level, and he continues to build and to grow himself, learning, studying, being actively involved in his community. I went to a city council meeting for the first time in my life just a couple months ago, because I'm like, this is important. this is the community I live in. I need to be actively involved in helping to shape where my kid may someday graduate, and she may live here or she might move away, whatever that is. But I need to make sure that I'm involved in my community so that I have a voice. I'm part of this. It's in a sense my civic duty, but it's also part of being a man, being
Hmm.
proactive in the future of your children's children. And then I think it's about also, we could say discipline. And I think discipline in a different sense is different for every man and whatnot. I can discipline myself to get up and walk a mile every single morning, but do I have the same discipline to stop myself from watching porn? Hmm, maybe, maybe not. So it might be different, but actively using it, consciously using it, is where discipline comes in. Is when you consciously say, "No, I'm not doing this," or "Yeah, hey, yeah, I don't care. It's raining. Get your tennis shoes on. Let's go." You know, Sergeant
Right.
Major would be screaming at you right now if you weren't out there, right? And that's like you have to become. I actually wrote this down. You have to become your own Sergeant Major. You have to
Yeah.
become your own CO. You got to be the one who's telling you to do the orders, and you can complain to yourself because you're your own boss. Like that boss sucks. Hey boss, I got that job done. I didn't,
Right.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like you have to have that little voice in your head that is the sergeant major, the the CO or whoever, whatever persona you want to give to it, to kind of kick your ass in gear and get you out there running when you don't want to because it's cold or raining or whatever the excuse of the day might be. Bed is always going to be warmer and more comfortable than out there running. So, you can easily find excuses, but I don't think Sergeant Major is going to really care for some of those excuses. So, having those in your head. But you were talking about as a man, pulling those people up in your life, your spouse, your kids, your people who are around you who depend on you, and pulling them up. And I think that's kind of going along the lines of what we were saying before about how I want a better life for my kids than I had, and I want their kids to have a better life for them. And it's like we build on these things, and we allow ourselves to get to a certain level, and hopefully that's the jumping off point for that next generation, for those people that they now get to start from this higher level than maybe you or I would have started off at at whatever level we were at. And then it just kind of helps everyone kind of just pull everyone up. And so I think that's an important aspect too, is that you do have to think about all those other things. Yeah, sure. Doing those guilty pleasure type things, some of the stuff that you just mentioned. Yeah, you might enjoy those things, but what example are you setting for those people who are around you? If you don't have the discipline to, get up and exercise or to put in the work for whatever it is that you're doing. You're starting a business. If you don't have the discipline to run your business the way it needs to be run, well, it's going to fail, and it's going to be a bad experience for everybody. It's for your family, for you, for everyone involved. It's just going to be a bad experience. And so that would end up being a turnoff probably to anybody who's observing you, children, other people like that. They're going to be like, I don't want to do that kind of thing. See what happened to dad when when he went through that? I don't want to do that too. And so then they don't take chances or bet on themselves to do something bigger and better than just the status quo, right?
right,
Yeah,
yep. It's a responsibility that we have to take on, and I think that no matter where a man is in his life, he can begin to take accountability and responsibility for his family
yeah,
and begin to work and grow. If he doesn't take care of himself, then his family is going to suffer. And I bring up this phase or this phrase that I was told by my dad when I was a kid: "Happy wife, happy life." And I look back at that and I think that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because if dad is always trying to please mom, mom wants him to be a strong man, and he's cowarding, oh, she's not happy with me, I better do something to make her happy. And it's like, no, you need to become the man that you are, and work on yourself. And if that means you have a question about solidarity, and I thought about this every year for the last few years, I've been taking a week away from my family, and
Okay.
go to a location undisclosed, all that good stuff, and I spend a week alone. I try not to, like, there's no self service, all that kind of good stuff, and I bring journals and notepads, and sometimes I bring a whiteboard, just depending on like how much work I want to put in. And I spend a week working on the things that I can't work on at home or around the distractions. I can't have a comfortable bed because that'll make me want to stay in bed. And so I have, it's a rugged situation, right? It's like camp, just straight out camping out for a week solid by myself. I hardly see, a few times I've seen maybe one, maybe two people, but nope, it's all by myself. And I take that time to grow and to look at things and do some introspection into who I am, and then identify some, like, hey, like, I'm struggling with this, so let's go for a walk and speak openly, audibly, and expel that, get rid of it, put it out, just dump it out, let it go, whatever, for whatever. And I come back refreshed, ready to go, and dive right back into my relationship. And I always come back just different in a way
Okay.
that even the family's like, all right, that's, oh yeah, look at
It's
that, he's
good
like,
stuff, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
he's good, like, whatever. And so I have buddies out there who live in solidarity, and
Hmm.
well, I think that's okay. Like, for some mountain men did it for years and years, but they had the times when they would come down to town to buy supplies and shower and all that good stuff. And I think that's, if you're out there and you're by yourself, there's nobody else around, you keep losing relationships, whatever else, figure it out, get it figured out, and then find some friends, call your buddies, build your tribe, and start working on something greater than yourself.
Yeah, and to your point, if you're out there and you're living in kind of solitude and you're losing these relationships, there's probably one common denominator in that whole equation, and it's probably you. And you probably have to do a little self reflection and look inside and say, like, what am I doing that's causing all these people to distance themselves from me? Some people some people want that. Some people want to be alone and in solitude, but I think as a species, we're not meant to be completely alone. Like you have to have your tribe, your people around. It doesn't have to be a big tribe. It doesn't have to be 50, 60, 100 people. It doesn't have to be anything kind of crazy. You can have a handful of people who are your close people, and that may be sufficient for you. Or maybe you're the type who wants to have a little bit bigger of a tribe. I think being completely alone is probably not the best thing. Something like what you're saying, like take a week and go do your thing. Okay, cool. Like that helps you to focus and work through some stuff that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do with distractions around. And just life happens. Being a parent, you got to take care of things, and you may just not be able to focus on those things, but plan it out, and you get that time to go and work on those things that are important and need full attention and no distractions, no screen time, and no devices and things like that, where you could just sit there, focus, and get stuff done. That works for you. That may not work for everybody. Some people, hey, I can't fit a week into my schedule for anything. Never mind, taking a week for just myself and working on that. They may not be able to do that, but in your case, that works. But I think it's important to find time to work on yourself. Maybe it's not taking a whole week. Maybe it's, hey, I need 15 minutes in the morning before I get out and do something where I can just reflect on the day, or reflect on something, or maybe it's at night, or and you reflect on what you did in the day. kind of like an after action report. What are some good things? What are some bad things? How do I improve? All those types of things, right? And you can kind of take a look at that, and that's another way of doing it too. But I think it's important to have that time for yourself. I know for me, my time is when I go to the gym and I'm exercising, and I'm just, yeah, there's other people around, but I got my earbuds in. Nobody's talking to me. I'm not listening to anybody else. I'm not doing anything. I even go to the gym with my wife, but her and I do separate kinds of exercises, and we don't. I mean, other than, hey, you ready to go? Like, we don't really talk to each other while we're at the gym. We just go and do our thing, and it's just like my time to just kind of process through stuff and think through things, and yeah, move heavy things too, at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it looks different for everybody,
yeah,
but the underlying point is still the same.
yeah, it is.
We men, we need time to figure it out. We need time to look at our lives. We need to figure out what's good, what's negative, what we can do better, what we can let go of. And then something that I've really been I struggle with this in my own personal life, so I know everybody's going to have a little bit of issue with it, and that's called forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to give forgiveness. This last couple weeks ago, I was put a post up on my Facebook. When you have nothing left to give or nothing to give forgiveness. It's free. It's easy. You just give
Yeah,
it. Forgive yourself, because I mean, let's be honest. How many mistakes have we made? Again, like
plenty.
UCMJ right there, buddy. Like, but hey, it's in the past. I can't fix it. I forgive Lee for what's happened, and we're going to keep moving on because
Yeah,
that's what we need to do.
I think that's a great thing. Yeah, when you have nothing left to give, you still have forgiveness, and you can give that if you choose to. But I think we all need to do some work on that, especially with ourselves, like you said. Yeah, guilty of that myself. I need to probably take some of that advice and take that and process some of that myself. But I think we all need to kind of just take a step back and realize that there are things that we can work on ourselves, whether it's stuff like forgiveness or just any number of things. But we're a work in progress. We will continue to be a work in progress, and that's kind of what makes life exciting. That you don't know necessarily what's around the next corner, but whatever it is, that you can adapt to it, and you can adjust and just do the things that you need to do in order to become the type of person that you want to become, and you just keep working on that day after day, and eventually you never quote unquote get there where you just stop, and it's always a work in progress, because whenever you get to, let's use that ship example, whenever you get to that port, well, there's going to be another port that you want to get to somewhere else down the line, and so you just keep shifting course, and I think that's the best way to look at it, I think.
Yep.
But
yeah, for sure.
So, Lee, again, before we wrap this up, I know we're kind of getting a little long here on time, but tell us again the name of your book, just again an overview of the book, and where people can find it, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So the book is called How to Live a Better Life. 6 basic chapters, covers everything that I think are the fundamentals of life. The first thing, obviously, like being self-aware. You need to know who you are, what you like, dislike, all those good things. And then you also need to know what love is. I think that the world has twisted the word love to mean something that it's not. And so when we say I love you, it means something else. And so I talk about what love is, the aspects of love, and what real love looks like from somebody else. And then I talk about, of course, I touch into sex and some things just personal to me. You have to read it to figure out what that is. And then I talk about money. I have a chapter called The Art of Money. I feel like we don't teach our kids about money. We don't do a good job of doing it. As we rely on the school system or somebody else to try to teach them. And let's just be honest, there are 17, 18-year-old kids who can't even count change.
Right.
Seriously, like really.
Yep.
And so there's a whole chapter on money, talks about banks, talks about having budgets, and talks about savings and doing stocks and things like that, building wealth.
Yeah.
It's just an overview. I try to point people back to other books that I've went and found the information from. I think that's super important. I'm not the expert, but I know somebody who is. And so I do that a lot. I also have a chapter on religion, like we talked about earlier. It's called Religion, the Priest, the Monk, and the Son of a Preacher Man. And it goes through just the worldwide religions, the idea of who your God is. Who is your God? Who do you serve? Who do you worship? And then, of course, then I talk about my own personal faith and what I believe in God. Ultimately, I believe that it's a personal relationship. It doesn't matter what church you go to. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Baptist or atheist or whatever. It's your personal relationship with your God. And so I talk about that. And then I talk about what it means to be a human. And it's basic psychology. I don't think we teach our kids basic psychology. And one of the things that I cover is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And break them down in more of a modern sense of those needs. And then I finish it out with a chapter called moderation. I believe that the key to a long life is moderation. You can live for many, many years. People who smoked and drank in their past have seen 100 years old. And so I believe moderation is key to a long, successful life. And then that's the book. You can find it on Amazon, How to Live a Better Life. You might have to type in Lee Freeburg. I'm not that popular yet. And so just type it in there. You can also find me on Facebook. If you just go to Facebook, type in Lee Freeburg. There's two of us. I'm the good looking one. And I try to post on there quite often, just kind of things I think about, the direction I'm going with certain things. And I'm also currently in the process of writing a second book called How to Be a Better Man. And this book is going to cover, like I was talking about, like the weak man, the strong man. And then I'm going to break it down into a few key things I believe men need. First, like we talked about earlier, a tribe. Every man needs a tribe. We need a tribe of some sort. I think every man needs an inner circle, like a best friend, somebody that he can say, hey, bro, I need a vent. It's just a vent. Just hear me out and whatever else. And then chapter 5 in that book it's about it's kind of a look at the Pinocchio story. And I look at the Pinocchio story from boy to manhood, the growth of Pinocchio. And I break that down in there for how he sought pleasure, even went to Pleasure Island Pleasure Island, just lived up life. And then boom, there was consequences coming. He escaped the consequences, but he had to go through the storm and suffer. And there was hardship. And he came out a real boy, or came out with discipline and things like that. And so I kind of look over that book there. And then I round it out with Jack and the Beanstalk and the rite of passage, because every man needs a rite of passage. He needs to set his sights on something big that's achievable, but is going to cost him. And when he achieves, he scoops up the girl, scoops up the gold, and defeats his giants. And that's the rite of passage of every man. And so I plan to have that book out in June of next year. You can, again, Facebook, Lee Freeburg. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there. I don't post there as much. I've done a few videos and stuff. So
excellent. Well, I'll have those links in the show notes so folks can check it out there. And yeah, definitely go get a copy of the book. Again, that link will be in the show notes. But again, How to Live a Better Life, because I think that's something that we're all striving to do, and sometimes it's just hard. And when you don't have a roadmap or direction or whatever, and you're trying to figure out how to do 20 things all at the same time, how to raise a family, how to succeed in your career, how to maybe go back to school and get a education, or how to do whatever it is that you need to do. If you own a home, how to do all the home maintenance stuff that inevitably comes up, and it's just like you're trying to figure out all these things all at the same time, and sometimes it's just overwhelming. And having kind of a roadmap, if you will, to help guide you and prioritize things and make sure that you keep things in perspective, I think is important. And so I think this is going to be a great book for a lot of people, and so definitely go check it out. But Lee, thank you again for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation. Time just flew by here in this conversation, but I did enjoy the conversation, and so yeah, thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.